Hello everyone and welcome back to the Wolf Pack. There were actual wolves in this game, yo. So, hey everyone, it's good to see you all. This one has been a long time coming. I've been dying to talk about Bantam West, but I didn't want to until I made sure I got enough plays in. At the point where I bought the Shadow Governor's Pledge on my own, we've had 3 full plays at it, once at 3 and twice at 4 players. As always, this is not a sponsored board game review. With that said, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about this epic Western themed game. Now, Bantam West is an open sandbox game for 1 to 4 players where your goal is to earn the most notoriety points, but being an open sandbox, you actually have a lot of choices about how you can score points. Now, ultimately though, everyone gets 2 cards at the start, and it does give you a checklist of what points that you can score on your own, but everyone can get points in the game from like building cabins, from recruiting riders, mastering endeavors, and there are a lot of ways to get points. Setup isn't too bad. Here's a time lapse of me doing the whole game in like 7 minutes-ish. And the ultimate question that we always ask on this channel, but for some reason always eludes board game explanations in general, what do you do on your turn? Well, everyone in this game first starts off broke AF. So your goal is to go out there and make some money out in the very, very deadly frontier. So you have 4 tokens of grit that you can use on your turn. There's actually a coffee side and a tobacco side. And then you just move it over to the fatigue ticket, and that right there counts as 1 action. So in this game, everyone starts off in a different area. Mika, for instance, will start off at the train station. So after you spend 1 grit, you can move up to your speed. Here it says my speed is at 3, which means I can move 3 spaces. So I can go from the train station, hop on over here to this half circle, and that leads me on over to a matching event in the wilderness. So I'm gonna hop on over here, and then I can just end up over here at this wooden icon. Now on the map, there's a lot of places for you to like interact with, so you can even try to jump across the river if you're trying to take shorter paths. And one big thing about this game that's gonna revolve around all the map areas and NPCs is that there are checks. So in order for you to try to attempt to cross the river, you just have to roll a die, and then you're pretty much matching colors here. So in this case, the 6 shown on this tile in the Death Helm Wilderness is something you have to pass. So I would just have to roll a die, look at my starting agility stat, and in this case, Mika has a 3. So if I did want to cross this area, I would have 3, and I would need to roll at least a 3 to make that 6 and be able to cross. If not, Mika's gonna fall in the river, and you just follow the arrow down. That way she'll like fall off the terrain and then land up somewhere else with a wound. So that part right there, I love. It's very thematic in that when you're trying to jump across and hop on terrain, the character that you're using matters. And so there are some people that are a little faster and a little more able to cross these terrains better than others. Now you might be asking, well, where am I moving to, Tim? I used up that 1 grit. What's the next thing? Well, if I spend another grit, now I can do something called Endeavor. Since I'm on a log resource, I can attempt to Endeavor. So I'm gonna look at my logging Endeavor, and it says there's a 3 number here. So again, back with the checks, right? So I'm gonna take a 3 die, both 3 dice actually, roll them. And in this case, I got a 6, which means I would get 1 log, so that was a success. And each die is separate. So in this case, the 2 means I wouldn't get it. But one way that this game mitigates dice is that I can actually increase my willpower, or sorry, decrease my willpower, spend 1 up, and then that allows me to re-roll this die. 4, that means I would get 2 logs. What a lucky roll on camera, actually. 2 logs, just like that, and then this right here would go straight into my cargo catalog. So I have 1 log there, 1 log there, and there is a maximum set of resources that you can hold on to this game. And that right there is one very, very fun part about this, is that you have to be careful about the resources that you carry. That's why it feels like a very open MMO/RPG game, because if you die, you're gonna drop your resources and other people can loot you, other people can fight you. You can also fight predators, and then you can also run into bandits and they're going to chase after you. So you do have to make a very smart and a very kind of a conscious choice of how many resources you're willing to spend and how many risks you're planning to take before you take those resources and do the next thing, which is to take them and bring them back into town. Or in this case, for logs, I can actually build a cabin right on that spot, monopolize that area, and then regenerate more resources overnight. And even, well, actually building cabins is a huge ordeal here. I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, with those resources, I can turn them in, and that's one way I can make money, by going all the way back here eventually to the trading post where Jericho currently is, and then sell them back to Rita LaRue, and it'll list the price that she'll buy it for. On top of that, depending on the calendar of the month, it will also increase the type of resources that you're gaining. So in this case, for July, I would actually gain even more money than usual. That rhythm that the game strikes is beautiful, because you are always trying to maximize the number of resources in this game because like I said, you start off broke, right? So the resources really matter, and I love this whole pick up and deliver game that this game is doing. Because typically in pick up and deliver games, you get your stuff and there's nothing that kind of impedes you from going to the next spot to just turn in, and then after that you go back and get more stuff, right? But in this game, you do have to weigh out some big options here. You have to weigh out your path back in case you might have to jump across the river to avoid predators and enemies on the other side, or you can also worry about other players in case they want to attack you and take your stuff. And then you also have to be conscious of the size of your loot. You can't just carry 10,000 logs and then go back and turn them in for a bunch of money. Instead, you gotta be worried about 4 important resources that you wanna go back and turn in. That right there, I absolutely love about this game. It has a wonderful pick up and deliver / resource management game there. So building cabin, who doesn't want to build a house in any kind of game, right? Any kind of game where you have some resources to spend and you want to build a house, it's so much fun. And everyone wants to build a house because literally every single person I introduced this game to, there are 2 things that everyone is most interested in. 1, how do I build a cabin? 2, how do I start a fire? Let's talk about both. Okay, so when you build a cabin, you just turn in some logs and then you get to monopolize that resource, like I said earlier, and then that cabin does a lot of different things for you. So it can regenerate resources, it can provide a point of shelter because when people try to ambush you, they actually have to roll to make sure that they can actually hit you since you're inside a shelter. It also protects you from weather because each map sometimes has different weather. Like if you're in the snow region over here in the southern Lorne Range, there's frostbite. So you're gonna take damage every night. If you're in a cabin, you get to skip all of that. So the cabin is a big deal here, and it even allows you to score notoriety points for building one too. Earlier when I mentioned how you have limited storage slots, well, cabins can also expand your storage slot. So it does a lot for you in this game, and I love that too. So if you ask me, Tim, let's just cut to the chase. Tell me what's one of the best things about Bantam West. It's this, right? It's this level of immersion that Bantam West delivers on theme, because it really does feel like you are out there in the wild, wild west, just scavenging for resources, being able to weigh your risk versus reward, being able to be conscious of the decisions that you're making out there. Like, do I have enough storage? Is there enough ways for me to get back without dying? Is there enough people there that won't impede my path? Like that right there feels like such a really good MMO and RPG element. And the core of it is there, right? You're out there, you're fighting for resources, you're trying to make money, that way you can go back to the town and upgrade all your stuff, upgrade your deck of cards, upgrade all of your resources and horses and all that to make a name for yourself. Now let's go ahead and flip that to the opposite end and ask, what's one of the worst things about this game? Well, actually, one of my professors back in the day told me, he used to use a metaphor about knowing where the box is, how to stay in the box, and how to move slightly out of the box, but knowing that range, right? The thing for Bantam West is that it should really take to heart less is more. It really needs to focus in on all these core great concepts instead of introducing more stuff. And a lot of things here are overcomplicated when it doesn't need to be. So for instance, this is a real thing that happened during my playing group. How do I start a fire, Tim? Well, let me explain how fire works. So you need to have a weapon that's a fire starter. You need to pass different checks if you're in town versus if you're on a terrain versus if you're starting a fire on a cabin. Then the fire spreads once per night and into its own color only, but people can choose where it spreads to, or the fire starter can choose that. And then in the cabins, there's also an intensity level to them, and you can douse the fire. Fire is such a fun concept in this game, but it gets bogged down by the amount of options you shouldn't have and the amount of maintenance to it too. Because like this is one of the games where you want to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's learning the game. Like they're super excited about it, right? Like, oh cool, you can start a fire in your cabin. Like, well, how do I do that? And then you start explaining it and it's like 15 minutes later, you're like, wait a minute, like it doesn't need to be that long, right? So one overarching theme about Bantam West is that the fun just drives up, right? You hear about something, oh, fire, right? Goes up. And then as the exclamations go on, it just starts dropping and dropping and dropping, because then you lose the excitement that people initially had about a fun concept by bogging it down with unnecessary rules. Or more so not necessary rules, but like it expands too much on that sandbox. Like you don't need to give people that many options. They don't need to be able to navigate it and douse it. And the third one, right? Instead, make it simple. Here's a fire starter. It's gonna hurt you if you walk through it, and it's gonna spread at night. Like something like that, where it's just way more simple, would keep the game like at a high and make it continuously fun instead of bring it down. Okay, so we talked a lot about out here, right? We talked a lot about movement and traversing the terrain, endeavoring the predators and bandits and stuff. But what about here? What about Gallow Springs? Well, there's a lot of fun options that you have in the town. To me, one of the coolest things in this game is actually being able to interact with the NPC. Because like I said, for other pick up and deliver games, once you drop off stuff, that's kind of it, right? Maybe you score some bonuses, but there isn't really a way for you to kind of talk to NPC and try to do things with them. So in this case, like for instance, at Miss B's Haven, you can try to demand a drink and you can also try to get a discount. But to do that, again, we're referring to our checks. So I just have to match the 7 red. So the red over here is malice. If I have, let's see, in this case, Mika's not that good at being malicious. So she only has a 2 malice. So I would need to roll at least a 5 in order for me to demand a drink and get one for free. But if not, I'm gonna take damage there. And this part of the game is so much fun. Like everyone loves being able to, everyone being my gaming group at least, everyone loves being able to interact with the different NPCs because they have a lot of fun options. Demanding a drink, getting a discount, doing some gun tricks, trading for resources, and even trying to steal from the store or trying to break a horse and get them in a different way pretty much. And then on top of that, when you go to different stores, you can do different things there aside from interactions. At Miss B's Haven, you can also score points by when you kill bandits and predators here, you can mount their heads, that'll give you a point each. And then you can recruit riders, which will give you different bonuses. If you go to Strap Gatman, you can get different weapons. And then Rita's Outpost, you can also get different hunter skills in Shadow Governor's mode. And by the way, Shadow Governor's is the mode that I played the entire time. I actually didn't play Warm Welcome at all when it came to my game group. I just shoved in Shadow Governor's right away. And then lastly, at Mirth Greymane, you can get a mount and then get a saddle. And even some of those horses too, they can actually have different skills accompanied with them. I love this part about Bantam because it really does make you feel immersed into an RPG/MMO because you get to, like I said, interact with all the shop owners, do all these different actions. You can try bad stuff like stealing, but then there's consequences if you do that. You can go to jail if you don't steal properly. To me, this part feels really grounded because I love that you can even hide in your shelters from people trying to attack you. You can actually attack other people in the shelter. You can burn them down temporarily. And those interactions are such a fun highlight in Bantam. So the last big mechanic I want to mention in this game is, of course, combat. You all know I am hella picky with combat, and combat here is awesome. The only issue is that there's not much incentive for you to do combat. But let's talk about combat itself first. Now, essentially, it's a rock, paper, scissors type of game, but you do have 5 options instead of 3 that will cross-cancel each other out. And on top of that, you have to follow the range listed. Some cards will have unique abilities like Smokescreen and Death Whistle, giving you extra movement. And you can also buy weapons to add into your existing combat deck. And here's where you have that deck building aspect to it. For the most part, combat is really fun because there's this like cat and mouse chase, like, oh, I'm gonna attack you here and I'm chasing after you, but then like, oh shoot, I'm getting damage instead, I'm gonna run back and have to be within line of sight. So that part of it is extremely fun. The issue I have with it though is that everyone feels very underpowered. Like it's fun playing a card and then drawing a new one and getting new options and playing another card, but at the same time, there's this part where it's like, okay, well, I'm dealing 1 damage to you, you deal 1 damage back to me, and it's like this back and forth where it's almost a stalemate-ish. And it just feels like there should be more power to each person's punches, especially if there are names like Death Whistle, right? Death Whistle sounds crazy, but then when you look at the card, it's like, okay, if I roll a 7 on my sneak for Mika, then I can run away. So with really epic names like that, and with everyone being a deadly stranger, then you want deadly attacks. If anything, I'm surprised that a lot of the mastering elements here, like for mastering an endeavor, I'm surprised you can't master combat. Because if you can master combat and then unlock new skills for that character, that would give way more incentive to actually fighting. And if you don't like fighting this game, totally fine, because you can turn off PvP entirely. But for someone who is of course gonna turn on PvP to the maximum, I expected a lot more when we're fighting. Like I always found myself asking, okay, I wanna fight this person, I wanna take their resources, but it takes so many resources to just get to that person. And even when I do, I have to like chase them around and kind of like hit them for such little damage to the point where I'm like, okay, it's not even worth fighting another person. I'd rather just endeavor here where I am and not move and kind of just turtle in that one area. If people are worth notoriety points, and again, you're trying to hit 10 notoriety points to win the game, right? Get 10 points, you win the game. If people are worth like 1 point at a certain amount of NP that they have, and then when they have like 5 notoriety points and they're worth 2 or 3 victory points, that would give way more player interaction, because instead of just turning one region and then coming back to town to turn stuff in and get points and money, and you go back and repeat the same thing, you would actually be inclined to make sure you stop other people from doing so. And to do that, you need to give people way more incentive and worth way more value. That way you're actually fighting others. And when you do fight, it should be quick, not quick, but it should be meaningful, right? So it should have really big punches, especially if everyone here is a deadly stranger. Then you want them to have deadly attacks. So to summarize the big highs and lows of this game, I love the RPG aspects of this game. Like, it does it so well. If it set out to be an open sandbox game, it definitely did that, because you are out here in the Wild Wild West, you're endeavoring, you are weighing your risks versus rewards, you're interacting with different NPCs. There are so many different RPG elements here that translates so well. And I love how interactive it is with the game itself. Could be more interactive with players though. And that actually brings us to the next point, like, what are the lows of this game? So if I had to like pick 2, the 2 major lows for me, one has to be the overcomplication. Like, it doesn't need to overcomplicate some aspects. Fire, make it more simple. It'd be way more fun to be streamlined. And like looting, it gives you like 7 different options of what to loot instead of just being like, take one thing. Once you understand the core concepts, honestly, the game flows like butter, because you literally spend 1, do an action, spend 1, do an action, and once someone does that 4 times, it moves on to the next person. And it sounds like long turns, but they're really not. The turns flow by really quick once everyone is just familiar with the core concepts of the game. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that once you go through this rulebook, you are thinking about all the details that this game has, but then once you actually play it, you realize like, oh shoot, like that's it, my turn's over, I move on to the next person, and it's like go, go, go. So this game the pacing is way, way faster than what the rulebook lets off. The second main issue I have is with the asymmetry. The characters don't really feel asymmetric at the end of the day. Like, yes, they start off with different stats, but honestly, like, it doesn't feel different. Like, oh, you're playing as Jericho or you're playing as Levi. It's like, okay, we're playing as a character that has different stats. And one way to address that is to actually give each character, it's like the same problem that I mentioned in my last review for Black Rose Wars. They did the same thing, where like they just cut down asymmetry to a point where it's not truly asymmetric. I would feel like a different character if I actually had a player power, right? Imagine like, oh, I'm gonna stay away from Mika because she can throw axes from 2 spaces away, 2 acres away. Or like, oh, I'm not gonna bother walking by Hannah because she's gonna light me on fire. Something crazy like that, where if you're playing as a character, people should be afraid of facing off against that character. Because again, if we're sticking to the theme here, they are deadly strangers. They should have deadly abilities on top of being able to refine their combat deck more. So all in all, I think Bantam West has so many amazing things going for it. It overcomplicates itself on some issues, but that's what makes me excited about it. At the end of the day, is Bantam West a game I recommend? 1000% yes. Like, yes, I did the tutorial for this game and stuff, but again, these are not sponsored board game reviews. I say what I want, honestly. And I only make this video because I'm truly passionate about it. So when it comes to this game overall, I feel like if it just ignores, honestly, the other game modes and focuses on Shadow Governors only and refines all those core systems that I mentioned, I am 1000% excited for the next reiteration of this, because once it refines that core material, it's gonna be freaking wonderful. So overall, a 4 out of 5 for me. Such a beautiful, wonderful game where you are immersed in the Wild Wild West. And it's a game that I'm gonna continue introducing to many others as they come over and play. So with that said, those are my thoughts about Bantam West. Let me know what you all think about this game down below. Is it something that you're interested in? Is it something that you're on the fence about? I wanna know it all. And if you made it here to the very, very end, go ahead and comment down below, deadly, because that's the vibe. That's the overall consensus that I'm feeling about this game. I just wish it pushed it a little bit more. So with that said, thank you all so much, and I will see you all in the next video.